Let's talk about our first topic on the list, Content Delivery Networks, or CDNs. And it's a topic we've covered slightly in the course. It helps with accelerating almost any website by caching its files in servers around the world. You see, whether your visitors come from Europe, Asia, North America, anywhere else, content is automatically served from the nearest server for the fastest possible speeds. And this diagram is from the Cloudflare website, probably the most popular CDN service in North America. Setup is extremely simple on their website. You don't need to do anything with code. You just go through their webpage, tell them what you need done, and they do all the hard work for you. All you need to do is update your DNS name servers to use Cloudflare, and it kicks in automatically. Now, what does that mean? Well, originally, if this is our origin server, that is our own server that we have all our files on, and these CDN servers are owned by Cloudflare. Well, originally, the request from a user, let's say the user is in Alaska, when a user requests a web page, the user's request, because we modify within Cloudflare and tell it, hey, instead of coming directly to us, to our origin server, we modified our DNS configuration so that this user gets routed to Cloudflare's servers. So they go to here upon initial request. The edge server, and this is what we call a CDN server sometimes, makes a request to the origin server for the content the user requested. And the origin server responds with the request, and then finally the edge server responds to the client. All right, so that doesn't seem any faster, does it? Well, the value of a CDN's proximity to the client occurs after the initial request to the origin server. You see, the first time around, this server needs to get the files from the origin server. However, it does something called caching, where again, we're going to cover in this section. After the initial request, this data gets cached or remembered onto the network of the CDN, so that each subsequent request from the client only needs to go as far as the nearest edge server that is here. So any more requests from this client is always going to go to the server and never have to worry about the origin server. Now, why is this helpful? Well, obviously it improves page load speed. They're also configured so it handles higher traffic loads. It can block spammers, scrapers, and other bad bots because, well, Cloudflare and other companies that offer this specialize in this. So they dedicate a lot of time to their engineering team to fix these problems. It reduces your bandwidth consumption, and sometimes they also do load balancing between multiple servers. Again, load balancing is something that we'll cover in this section. Finally, it is also very secure. Usually they allow you to send static files over HTTPS and also protect websites from things like DDoS attacks or distributed denial of service attacks. So there's a lot of benefits to it. Now, in this example, I used Cloudflare, but there's a lot of options out there. We have obviously Cloudflare, and you can see how many servers they have around the world that based on where your users are, they can just connect to the closest server. There's also Amazon's popular CloudFront. And then Microsoft also has its own Microsoft Azure Content Delivery Network. And there's a ton of other resources, but these three are probably the most popular. Now let's go back to the diagram. You see, to understand why CDNs are so popular and so widely used, we have to figure out what the problem is. And the problem is something called latency. It's the annoying delay that occurs from the time that I hit enter to request a web page to actually getting the web page to load onto my browser. And that delay is affected by a number of factors, and we've talked about it in the network optimization section. in all cases though, a big part of it is the delay by the physical distance between you and the website's hosting server. Let's use this diagram as an example. A request, let's say I was in New York, to Singapore, a server that is in Singapore, well, that's a long distance. And a request doesn't necessarily go directly to Singapore. It most often hops from one router to another router to another router until it gets all the way to Singapore. And then finally, they have to send those files back. Now, it's pretty clear how CDN improves this latency. By pulling static content files from the origin server in Singapore into a distributed CDN network in a process called caching. So that now, if the server was just in Portugal, the CDN server was just in Portugal, we avoid all these extra hops. And this is a point that we don't really need to go any further in. It's pretty evident why CDN networks are valuable. And you want to use companies that already have servers around the world like Cloudflare, Amazon, and Microsoft, because they already have that speciality. And they're fairly cheap to use, and some offer free options like Cloudflare. So definitely give it a go anytime you need to optimize delivering files to the front end. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.